Once again, I don't know why I came up with this idea, but I came up with this idea that today we would have a talk called Transformation Station. And it probably had something to do with poring over the interfaith calendar or something else that's going on this time of year, such as spring, on the verge of showing up. But I thought about that and just decided I wanted to talk about these two words and how they fit together. One of the things, of course, is transformation itself. Transformation, change, alchemy, shift, something changing form. What does that mean to each of us? What transformation means to each of us is very personal, and it depends on where we're at right now, or what we're moving into, or what we've just moved out of, what that means for us right now. If we're at all busy and active, we may find that we have 2 or 3 different things that are sort of transitioning in our experiences right now. And maybe we're doing our best to manage being present to more than one transformation. And maybe they all add up to a bigger one that we're just beginning to realize is taking place for us. So I thought about this concept of station initially as a turnstile. In a railway yard, they have this thing where the cars are brought up. I don't know how many, but any railway people in the room? Okay. So, turnstile. How many cars on a turnstile? Lots or one?
2 or 3.
Okay.
Generally, it turns to the engine.
Okay. So there would be an opportunity to come in there via the tracks and then get turned in another direction and then go back in that new direction. And I thought that was a pretty neat, visual for a transformation station. So the other thing then is what makes up our ideal transformation station. What is your ideal way of moving through change? And what sort of things do you bring in around you to support that process? Do you know? Because perhaps if you haven't identified what those are, your transitions may be a little bit less graceful than they could be if you took some time to think about what those are. So, of course, resisting change only creates friction, it creates delay, it can create some wonderful things like festering, Ooh. It can create heat, Resisting only prolongs something that in some way is timely and inevitable. So then, of course, we move to this idea that may be acceptance. If we walk into this exploration with the idea of acceptance, we've begun already to step into transition willingly. Since it is happening, why not admit that it is happening actually on a regular basis? And once again become familiar with the principles that govern transformation and allow ourselves to do them more gracefully, maybe to get more of the gifts in less time and have a better time of it than making it dramatic and elongated necessarily. So this week I did make sure not to print my quotes in gray because then I wouldn't be able to find them. I have a couple definitions about what it means then, this term transformation. And they come from the general, the mathematical, the alchemical, in terms of philosophical, I'm going to speak the same way all the way through here, and in terms of chemical changes, just to give you a few. So generally, transformation is a thorough or dramatic change in form or appearance. Mathematically, this is interesting to me, a process by which one figure, expression, or function is converted into another that is equivalent in some important respect, but is differently expressed or represented. So this change, it's very interesting. If we keep reading, you'll notice there's sort of a pattern here. In alchemy, We talk of the use of these principles for changing base metals into gold, or philosophically interpreted, changing a lesser experience into a greater one. I have created this workshop called Metaphysical Alchemy, where I go through a whole process of turning the seeming lesser into the greater, with a choice of about 5 or 6 different tools and pathways, so that we can each gravitate toward the one that feels the best and learn how to get the gift from what seems to be happening in the moment. So change chemically is usually an irreversible chemical reaction involving the rearrangement of the atoms or one or more substances and a change in their chemical properties or composition, resulting in the formation of at least one new substance. So through all of that, you may have noticed that there was this trend, of course, that some new form, some new expression, some new representation happened at the end of whatever the transformation was. But in every one of them, what was evident was that there was nothing new added. It was just actually a revelation, a rearrangement of qualities so that something else could express that was unknown or hidden, that needed to be triggered in some way. I really find that fascinating. When we think about personal transformation in our humanness, we're so inclined to run out and seek, right? Look for and go get whatever must be missing, right? Or get rid of what shouldn't be here, and then we'll be all right. And that is not how transformation takes place. The truth of the matter is that it's about uncovering this wholeness that's already there. It's about revealing an expression, inviting a pattern to show up that's just been hidden. It's just been covered up. It's been unknown to us because we were sort of in a different arrangement, showing up as a different form of ourselves. So if you think about all of that in terms of your own transformation, and you know, none of us is new to this kind of study. So I know I'm preaching to the choir in a way here. But if you think about it, there might be a remembering or a recognition or the addition of some point of view, thinking about these things right now, that allows you to maybe see whatever it is that you're going through in a gentler light, you know, maybe with a little less weight and drama. Because all of that weight and that drama, of course there's drama in nature, you know, that is part of the game. But we add to it when we don't realize that what's going on already is perfect. There's this other interesting constant in transformation, which is having to do with that fact that we're really not adding or taking away from anything in any regard. And that is that back of, this is the way Ernest Holmes and Thomas Troward talk, back of whatever the expression is this one life. This one life which seeks and finds expression by means of all of creation, including us. And so in a personal sense, whatever's going on in our lives, back of it is some idea of the expression of life itself that is ready to happen. Why is it ready to happen? Because it's happening now. The circumstances must be ripe, and we must be the right one for the job, or it would be happening in somebody else's experience, right? So the neat thing about pausing to recognize not only, I just said a moment ago, that resistance doesn't work, that acceptance is a great way to walk into this, to understand that transformation is part of life, obviously it is, but to add to that toolkit before we sort of step in deeply into the process itself is to recognize that this power, this one life that is back of and moving through all life, is moving through ours and that of everyone else. And what it does is it offers, when we sit with it, however we do that, a perspective that allows us to get the gift, to see the purpose, to find the meaning, to recognize the timeliness of whatever it is that we're experiencing. And doesn't that make it a lot easier already? So there are a couple of elements. And see, here's one now. For stepping into a transformation that moves smoothly and naturally through its proper cycles. We think of many analogies in nature that we see all the time, and I just mentioned some a little bit ago, because a lot of things are getting ready to burst forth in bloom, with new life right now. We look at everyday life, and actually we have some examples of transformation that are really useful. Some of them are so basic, they're impossible to miss. For example, if you've been out working in the garage or the yard all day, or riding your bike or walking on the beach, you can transform who you've become at the end of all of that back into a nice, clean person who smells good and doesn't have any dirt or sand stuck to them or whatever, maybe ready to go out or have dinner or something, just be clean for the next thing, simply by a process that we all use involving soap and water. A little bit of time, a dry towel, maybe a drying, I don't know about you, but I just let mine dry naturally. But, there's a simple process of transformation that we do every time we bathe. And there are so many more. And the truth is that doing the same thing mentally, emotionally, and spiritually doesn't involve any other complicated steps. We get to recognize, well, what would the soap be, in terms of clearing my mind? What would the soap be in terms of clearing up my emotional state? What would the water be? The cooling, the rinsing, the clarifying. What would the towel or the dryer be? Might it be the warmth of the sun? Whatever it is, actually, these are really simple principles that we can call upon in our own experiences of transformation. And they will work for us. Because when we use the word principle, we're talking about a law in nature. We're talking about something that always produces the same result, no matter who uses it or when. It's simply something that we can rely on. Just like when we mix two certain colors, we always get this other color. It's the same for everyone. When we add two certain numbers, we always get the same outcome, no matter who we are. So there are principles of transformation that work in the same way. So first of all, we might be looking at what it is that we are in the middle of addressing in terms of personal transformation. Then we will look at what are the principles that are sort of equivalent to our soap and water, if you will, that are going to help us to facilitate this transformation. Some of them, like in alchemy, trigger a reaction that then naturally takes care of itself the rest of the way. What might they be? Sometimes, my favorite combination, by the way, is a legal pad and a sharp pencil and a cup of really good coffee. And there's one more ingredient, whether that's what you're up to or something else. It's the environment. Scientists know this, and artists, musicians, everybody knows this. You have to have the right kind of environment so that the principles that you're employing, the reactions that you're triggering, the results that you're aiming for have an opportunity to show up. So we want to facilitate them. We want to make them easy. We want that to happen without interruption. Funny thing, yesterday, I was working on another rendition of all of this. And I'm sitting at home, and there are familiar sights and sounds, and Rick's over in the corner, and he's working on some things on his computer, and I hear music, and I hear voices. And the problem is, the music was recordings of us. The voices were mine, and the conversation or whatever was happening in the environment was something that I wanted to engage in. So I got up and I said, me and my notepad and my pencil, we're going on walkabout. See you in a little while. And I went to my favorite coffee house. I'm not sure if I should tell you where it is, because then it might not anymore be the environment where I can be alone. There's this one person who goes there, and I'm like, okay, if she comes, I'm going to say, I can't talk now. And either she'll get up and go, or I will. But anyway, so I go to this place, sit down, got my legal pad, a sharp pencil, really good coffee. I might have to tell you where it is. And there are people conversing, but I don't know them. So it's different. I don't feel like I need to get in on their conversation. I don't know them. There's music playing, but it's not a recording of us doing a song. So I'm not interested in that either. There's all kinds of stuff going on. But for some reason, that is one of those environments of transformation that works really well for me. And I sat down and wrote 8 pages without getting up. That works for me, and I know that it does. The other way that I can go with anything, though, is to either not know what supports me best in experiencing whatever it is that I'm wanting to experience. Not knowing what principles specifically are going to help that to happen. Not knowing what processes bring it about, and not knowing what kind of environment I need in order to be successful. I can have a hell of a time. Does that sound familiar? And what if you know those things, but you haven't given yourself permission to line them up? Here's the other thing. What if you know what you need? I'm guilty of this, and I'm working on it so much better than I used to be. But there's this little pattern from being a child, which was, as soon as everybody goes away, then I'll be myself. So then you have to sneak, right? You have to sneak these little patches of being totally authentic until someone comes in the room, or whatever. You go, school's back in session, or it's dinner time, or whatever the case may be. I figure if I stand up here and tell you about that myself, you might smile and nod and realize that in some way you have been editing or holding back your own authenticity to accommodate the relationships that you believe you're in. And there's a possibility that we could all allow more of who we truly are to come forward. There's another process of transformation. And be part of those relationships. Because here's what I believe. I believe that it is not selfish and foolhardy and untimely to make sure that we know what we're going through. That we make sure that we know what principles will support us. To make sure that we have, that we know how to use them, and that we're in an environment that supports that. And here's why. Because what I believe is that when we allow ourselves to do that, and when we allow ourselves, therefore, to emerge fully as who we truly are, who we're becoming, there's something more than just personal satisfaction that takes place. There's something more, is that those other parts of ourselves that we may not have even realized that we have repressed, put on the shelf, minimized, cut back on, put away completely, forgotten even, are part of who we are. As Gary Simmons would say, part of who we have come here to be. And I have a feeling that if we can dare to step into our relationships with our families, our friends, our co-workers, our neighbors, strangers, people down the street, people in the next county or country or continent, if we can do that authentically, we'll recognize that we have major, major, major gifts to give. All that stuff that we hear on the news, that we can't imagine people doing to one another, happens because those people have forgotten who they truly are. And when we remember who we truly are, when we give ourselves permission to do that, we not only experience our own transformation into the next iteration of who we are, We get to be present and available to do that with everyone else on the planet. And that is timely. That is timely. The last thing I want to say, which is a little bit of a spiritual, I forget what that word is, but it's a little backwards. Because if we wait until we think we're transformed enough to begin to share, to begin to express, to begin to give, to begin to serve, we will wait too long. It is actually in taking those courageous steps to be authentic, to express in a real way, to share and to serve before we're sure that we have anything to give, before we think we have enough to share, before we think we have ample time or money to be of service. The trick is to do it first, and Spirit will fill that avenue with more than enough for you and your recipients, if you will. So what I invite you to do today is to honor whatever periods of transformation you find yourself in. Recognize that all you have to do is look around you. You may look in nature. You may look in mathematics. You may look in chemistry. You may look in psychology. You may look in music. You may look in art. Wherever you look, you will find principles that you can use to support you in your transformation. And along with those discoveries will be some sort of intuitive knowledge as to how to use them to trigger your own awakening. And you already know what kind of environment makes you feel best. Mine, one of them, the other one, is riding my bike and listening to Sesame Street unknowingly. I know what makes me feel so in touch with the highest and the best of who I am. And so sometimes I doggedly get myself to those places, practically crawling on my knees because I want so much to remember. We can plan for those things. We don't have to wait until we're desperate. So I invite you to do that for yourself and know that in doing it for yourself, you're doing it for everyone around you, whether you know it or not. And when we come together in wholeness, then we'll move to walk out that door and ask, how can I give? How can I serve? I think the time is now.